Crofton, now you're up. It's time for professionalism.
Hello and welcome to the Good, Bad, or Bullshit podcast, the podcast where three gorgeous dudes with intelligent opinions discuss a topic at random and pretty much decide if it's good, bad, or bullshit. We're also modest. My name is Crofton Steers. I'm the men's speed stick of this podcast, if you will. With me is the Old Spice of this podcast. I'm talking about Mike Hodgins. Mike, how are you?
I think, wouldn't that be like organic salt rub that like hippies use? Whatever.
And, of course, the Axe body spray of this podcast. I'm talking about Bo Schwartz. Welcome, Bo.
There's the setup. I'm good. I feel like that's a compliment, but it feels like it was meant to be an insult. But
It was.
Accomplice salt.
Yeah,
No.
that's what it was. Complete accomplice salt.
So,
Bo-
Mike, you got off easy there.
I did. Well, it's funny, Old Spice, like I don't wear any like scented products, but in this house that I was renovating, there was
Except for your dirty underwear.
No, listen. Let me finish. There was a probably 40-year-old bar of soap I found that was by Pierre Cardin, who was big in the like 70s and 80s.
Okay.
And I can't say his name without thinking of George Costanza's dad in Seinfeld when he had a tie. And he was like, "It's a Pierre Cardin." Anyways, and then I used this soap, and my wife was like, "You smell really good lately." But now the soap is gone, and I'm back to smelling like nothing.
And it was
Or bad.
probably illegal. It's like full of chemicals. Your skin's burning. You've got rashes all over.
No,
You're like,
back
huh?
in Crofton, they tested it on all types of animals, so you could tell it would.
Let me predict the next few, like the next episode of Michael's life is that his dad comes along and says this friend of his has 2 cases of it in his attic. If only you just help him fix the fence, but then you fix the fence, but then he won't cough up the soap. This is a plot to a comedy show because you're like, oh man, it's a Pierre Cardin. So hard to find Pierre Cardin soaps.
Andrea actually, she tried to find the soap. She liked it that much, the scent of the soap. And I'm like, oh, I guess Pierre Cardin is past his prime.
You know what? I bet you on eBay they still have crates of it left over in Korea or Thailand.
I'm not gonna buy that on eBay. Sure, I found it in an old house. I'm not gonna buy it on eBay though. Come on.
She's probably like, I thought about this Pierre Cardin soap and I desperately tried to get it, but then I realized, you know what? Any soap will do. And I went down and I got you some Dove, and there, makes a huge difference.
Well,
turns out you just smell filthy.
No, it's more that I don't care about soap, so I go in and I always will buy Irish Spring, which is always on sale. So I'll be like, oh, it's 8 bars of soap for $3 or something. So I'll buy that. I'm like, it's soap, it'll clean me.
No,
But
so
she
you
doesn't care
use
for the
soap.
scent.
It's not to say that you never wash, actually.
I'm like, I smell like an Irish Spring. How could it be any better? I assume an actual Irish Spring smells like vomit and whiskey.
So do you not wear
Super
any
slam
clothes?
on Irish people.
Super racist.
I need to clarify this. Do you not wear deodorant at all?
I don't wear deodorant. And I actually found that I used to wear deodorant for probably decades. And then I slowly started tapering it off. And initially I was like, oh man, I need deodorant a lot. And then as I started tapering it off, I mean, I shower regularly. I was like, I don't
By
smell
regularly,
like,
do you mean 4 times a day?
no, how stinky? I'm not that stinky.
Yeah, some people are less stinky. It's true.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't sweat that much, and I'm not that stinky. I used to be probably more stinky when I was a teenager. You go on all those hormones, but yeah, I find usually like, and only times I ever didn't. It felt like I needed it was when I worked in an office. Like less so now that I don't. Occasionally there'd be something and I'd be uncomfortable in some shirt and feel like I'm sweating because you're wearing some uncomfortable shirt. So I'd keep a stick of deodorant in my office and I'd use that periodically.
What if you could do exercise?
Yeah, I have a shower after I exercise.
All right. Sounds
And
nice.
that stuff's not generally good for you.
It's true. I think the Axe body spray that I use on occasion, because I've really cut down, has like butane in it. It's like I'm dousing myself with lighter fluid.
Just to be clear, he cut down due to cost, not due to will.
No, due to like there's no point in wearing it. I mean, I've been largely unemployed for the past little while, so it's not like I've had anywhere. I don't do it for me. I like people to think I smell nice, and that way they fall in love with me, like it happens in the commercials.
But it's not
And
like that. When people smell that
it's totally
cloud
like that.
of that cloud of chemical scent, it mostly
What?
like I find it nasty. And sometimes and the more you use, the less you smell it. So you use more. So these people,
I don't know if
women and men,
if
who
a
will be
girl
like,
walks by, like a girl walked by today, and I caught a whiff of whatever it was she was wearing. I found it absolutely. I was like, oh, that smells good. I was
yeah,
like,
but
I
you
like.
also like Axe body spray, so you're into that stuff.
So my opinion's invalid. You're an axe racist.
No, it's not invalid. It's more that you're in the club of chemical scents.
Okay.
Speaking of clouds of chemical scents, Mike, maybe it's time to start up the old random topic generator.
I
If
give
only
that
it
one.
spewed Axe, it'd be better than the toxic fumes that come out of it. But yeah,
I'd love to have a random axe generator. That'd be great. All right, go ahead, Mike.
yeah.
By the way, that segue, Crofton, 9 out of 10. It's pretty damn good.
All right. The topic today is collectibles and/or collectors. I guess the people who collect the collectibles as well. They're all grouped in here.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good topic.
It is.
I think so. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, I was in Scouts, Beavers and Scouts and stuff, and they gave those badges on the sashes, and one of them or Cubs. It might have been Cubs. In Cubs, like I had the collector's badge, and at the time it was for
You
collecting.
collect a bunch of shit and you get
Yeah.
a badge.
Well, it was I collected, which it's something that seems really 80s, although people might still collect them. You know those big round pins that you put on shirts, like you'd get them everywhere, like in the
Yeah,
80s.
I had a jar full of those too.
You know, like it's a big round, like macaron or something like that. Anyway, I had a bunch of them, including.
Wait, because I didn't partake. Those things you collected, they're rewards for accomplishing certain feats, right? As a young person.
Well, the badges, yes, like the badges which were sewed onto your sash in Cubs. But this particular badge was called the collector's badge.
Right.
It's funny, I didn't catch that irony.
So wait, because the current gamer culture achievements are a thing, and I was like, wait, my mind's just blowing right now because I'm like,
Because
we had achievements before Xbox had achievement, and you got the achievement where if you collect all the achievements, you get the meta achievement, and that's
true.
the badge you got. You got the meta badge.
I always found one of the ironic badges as well was the sewing badge, which you get largely from sewing on a badge.
Oh, yeah.
Look, I sewed it on. You get sewing badge. Sew that on too.
I
Thanks,
never
guys.
thought about that, but yeah, the collectors, it's like you're collecting badges anyway, so
Yeah.
why would you get a collector's badge?
Just for dopamine hit
What
to
a
get you
stupid
trained
shit.
to love being rewarded.
Hey, on a bit of a side note about Cubs, do you remember that the main Cub dude was called Akela? Remember that?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
That's
thought
from the
that was his
Jungle Book.
name.
Yeah,
Akela.
yeah. Well,
Mr. Kayla.
it was my friend's mom was our Akela, and I just found out the other day because I went to see the new sort of live action Jungle Book that's where it came from. Apparently, Baden Powell, whatever his name is, who started Cubs, liked the Jungle Book, and he took the name Akela.
Damn.
I was like,
Well-
what? What do you know?
Well, I guess going back to collectibles, did you guys, before we talk about the collectors and stuff like that, did any of you guys at any point in your life collect things? And if so,
Yes.
what were they?
Oh.
The earliest I can remember were wacky cards.
I still have wacky cards.
I don't know what wacky cards
So
are.
Man, you don't know wacky
They're
cards?
like-
are?
they're-
They like
Yes.
garbage pail kids?
sort of.
They're better than garbage pail.
They're trading cards, but they're stickers. So basically, you could stick them on things, and they were like Mad Magazine style spoofs of products. Like instead of nerds, like you'd have a picture of like a box of boogers, and it'd be called like boogers or something. Like, and they just
I actually found a drawer at my parents' house, a drawer full of hundreds of wacky cards that I collected as a
that
kid,
is a treasure
and I stuck a whole
trove.
bunch of them in the back of my computer. There's
Alright.
one, it's like Super Mario Brothers 2, except it's called Stupid Moron Brothers 2, and it just is like a dumb picture, sort of spoofing Super Mario Brothers.
Inspired.
Yeah, they are kind of dumb.
So like,
But as a kid, you don't care. Like I collected hockey stickers for my hockey sticker book. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
kids collect shit.
yeah. There was I had the first run of Marvel trading cards.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
I had
I
those.
had the complete collection of non-foils. So I remember collecting all of those. Yeah, I think I actually still have it in my apartment somewhere. I have the complete Marvel,
Man,
whatever,
what I remember most
1990
about collecting
something.
those Marvel cards was that when I got the Silver Sailor card or Silver Surfer, I was like, man, he's the best at everything. It was like his strength was max, speed was max. He was like the best.
Yeah, I remember those cards for sure. I wasn't I maybe it's I just didn't have the money or whatever at that point to collect those, but
So
I know
far, I'm like not to jump, but I'm so far. It's like it's interesting just to think about this because when you were like, did you ever collect anything? And it's like, okay, clearly kids are like a start point for collecting because not only those things that are products aimed at kids. I collected comics too,
yeah,
but
me too.
I wonder how much of the because my answer when you said did you guys ever collect stuff was like yeah I collected like everything when I was a kid. I had rock collections that I found all
And
over
that's the thing.
leaf
Rock
collections, like
collection.
everything, like by bottle caps, pins, like you said.
My brother had a shell collection.
Yeah, you just collect everything, and it's like, and I wonder, is it kind of ingrained, like? Because as a kid, I remember, especially rocks, being like every time I go for a walk with this rail line near my house, I'd be like, "Oh, look at this rock," and for sure I had other rocks similar to that, but I'd be like, "This one's nice. I better put it in my collection." It's like it's a rock, like they're everywhere.
Yeah, I think I liked rocks, but my sister loved to actually collect little bugs. She had this little like plastic thing where you could put bugs in and they breathe, and she'd put spiders and butterflies in there and ants, and she just tried to put all the bugs that she could in there.
Coins. I had a coin collection.
Yeah,
Yeah, my parents started to get me into coin collecting. I don't know why. Maybe they gave me a hobby, but it didn't stick.
my
The my brother also, both me and my brother, we got into like there's berry picking near our house. Okay, there were like wild raspberries, and we would go and we'd pick them and make jam and shit with them. But like especially my brother Dev would go out and do this, and he would whenever we go on a family vacation, he would like be picking feathers. He'd be picking all sorts of different things. So I think it's the same, even though like you're obviously not making a collection of berries, it's the same impulse to go out there and it's like accomplishing a task and filling a series. Like if somebody showed you a list of like say printed out numbers on your desk 1 to 10, but the 7 wasn't there, and then like they said that one of these 3 boxes has the 7 in it, like people would be like, okay, I'm gonna open all of them. I need to get that 7 and put it there. There are people that desperately need to fill those sort of like series and collections and stuff. It's like an impulsive need. I'm not sure if everybody has it, but definitely some people have an excessive amount of it, like needy completionist. Bo has talked before to me about how he has difficulties playing these open world video games because there's all these options. You can go off in so many directions, and there's all these tasks, and it's like do 1 of 10, 2 of 10, 3 of 10, and all that sort of stuff.
yeah.
So he would be like, I can't start playing this game, or it's going to be ridiculous because I absolutely have to complete all of these things. Where I'm going to do some of these, some of those.
Yeah.
But coming back to like clearly it seems like kids it comes naturally to, and not only is it like there's a merchandising aspect to it, but clearly like rocks or bugs or anything that a kid might find. And it does make me wonder like is this related to like it's like humans being the hunter gatherers that we have like this impulse to when you go out someplace to be like oh I'll gather some stuff. We don't need food really, so you just gather whatever you find. Like I wonder if there's just something sort of ingrained.
Well, my question is based on, so there's ingrained or there's trained, because like my parents tried to get me into stamp collecting when I was in
Why?
I, I don't know, or when I was in maybe just to give kids something to do, I can
Yeah.
appreciate that more as a parent now. When I went to scouts, it's like this organizational system in which to get these badges and that sort of thing. Like I mean, a lot of it is encouraged at a young age, like, oh yeah, oh you've got to go see if you can find the rest. I don't know, like Mike could be right. It could be like sort of an ingrained thing, or it could be part of it could be just trained.
Yeah, I do wonder. I mean, but that's like so. Your initial question was like, did you used to collect stuff? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Like as a kid, tons of crap. But now I'm more of the opposite bent. Whereas even things now, mind you, I did kind of when I saw those wacky cards in that drawer, I was like, oh, I'm going to take these. But then I just stuck all the stickers like on my computer and around, and getting rid of it as a collection. And I think I still have a box of comics somewhere.
Well, but when you're younger, like
But
you're collecting the stuff, but it's different. Like where we're headed with this conversation is going to be very different, right? Because
well, because like as an adult, I do not like to collect stuff. I actively seek to avoid collecting anything, and I'm happy about the fact that things um, like movies and stuff like that are just streaming. You don't have to make a collection of your own stuff mostly anymore. You can just get them. I used to like buy books and stuff more, and that was kind of a collection when I was younger in my 20s. I'd be like, oh, I'd buy books I liked and whatever.
yeah,
But now I'm more like, no, there's a library. I do not want books. I mean, there's some I still have and love, and I might occasionally buy a book, but generally, I'm like, why would I want the thing? I don't like. I actively am trying to avoid all collections. Is
But
my
that's
aim, anyways.
you. You're more
That's
like a
me.
minimalist. You'd have to admit though that that's probably less common. There are less people like you and more people that want collections and to collect
Probably.
stuff, right?
Like, I mean, going
As
back,
adults.
yeah. And if I think of my, and then, okay, you think so. There's collecting, like, we talked about a bunch of things that are like specific hobby collections, and sometimes those, you could might make money out of them. I made fun of the stamp thing, but the guy who owned the house I live in, he made his living off of stamp trading. Like that's all he did was trade stamps, and I was like, I remember when I heard that, I was like, what? You can make money stamp collecting as a profession? That seemed totally crazy to me, but it can lead someplace. But I guess so. The extension of it is say hoarding, where people just and that's like a defined kind of mental illness, but essentially that's collection of everything, where people are just like, I collect everything, I don't throw anything out, and so I think that that's the far end of the spectrum of collecting, which is like again a mental disorder, but it's just like it's the extreme of collecting. So at what point is it like is it a good thing, or at what point? Because at that end of the spectrum, I think it's pretty identifiably a bad thing. Like hoarding
Yeah.
is not good.
I read a book actually, this is years ago, by Zadie Smith called The Autograph Man. And it's about this guy who's just obsessed with autographs. And it made me realize that there's this giant culture out there because while the book is fiction, it had to do with like, something that existed, which are these autograph chasers. And like some celebrities sign a bunch of autographs, and then some are really restrictive putting out their autograph there because there's this giant black market of autographs that go around, right? And so people became there. There's a group that was obsessed with making money. Some of them making money, some of them just having a collection of autographs, and it becomes their life. Now, I agree with Mike that there's definitely negative connotations to that, but there's so many people on the planet and they fill their lives with purpose in a myriad of different ways. And I'm not necessarily sure that like, you pick something it's not great to obsess about anything, to be honest, but like, what is so bad about being like focusing on, say, collecting something or being dedicated to that as opposed to, being dedicated to reading books or entertaining oneself or whatever? Like,
Feeding the poor or
yeah.
something.
Well, I mean, the
Or
feeding the poor
yeah,
is an active like
yeah,
volunteer.
like
Where I'm
volunteer.
just comparing leisure activities, like somebody who's obsessed with collecting versus somebody who's say obsessed with movies or somebody who's obsessed with books. Like obsession is obviously not a great thing, but the collecting is just like it's just one sort of shade of that. Really, like it's not in and of itself necessarily a bad thing. I would
yeah,
think.
yeah. I mean, it all comes down to I think because I think you can collect things if you have an attachment to it. Like if you are passionate about whatever it is, like it's funny that certain forms of it are acceptable and certain ones aren't. Like if you think of someone who's like an art collector, I mean they might you know, you might consider them pretentious or whatever, but if they're collecting art, then owning those things matters, I think, to someone who has a collection, which is it's a type of collectible, original paintings, and they're very rare. Some of them are, well, they're all unique, really, because a copy is generally worthless for art collecting. They're very unique, and so I think in that case, that type of collecting is kind of like there's probably a thrill of the hunt, and there's the trophy case. I mean, hell, even hunting can be collecting in this
Well,
weird way where you hunt a deer and you mount the head on your wall. It's sort of, why keep it? Why not make a coat and eat the meat and not keep all that crap? Like, why do you keep it? Right?
like the art that had crossed my mind too. Art collecting is something that again is like social. It's socially acceptable even to be sought after potentially. But the interesting thing about that I think sort of different is that that's essentially um, people who have wealth putting it into something that is either a gamble at gaining wealth or is a place to store wealth. So, like, if you're a billionaire and you buy an original Picasso at $70 million, you're just putting money out of taxable flowing around and into something like that. So I don't like, though someone might have an extensive art collection, I think that's sort of akin to someone having an extensive like portfolio of stocks and bonds. Like, whereas if you
Well,
well, I think
Well, no, like a high risk, a very like the highest risk form of investment. Like this Picasso might be worth 100 million next year, or my house might catch on fire and it's a turd.
well, yes, it's true,
So,
but no,
yeah.
but those things are also they're also insured for their value.
Well,
Like, don't,
sure,
you know,
sure.
I
but
don't
Okay.
I don't disagree with what Mike's saying on this sometimes, but I think that if you're in a lot of these things, like if you could buy an Action Comic #1 featuring the first appearance of Superman,
it's
and
the same, yeah, like
and
that's an investment of
it
money.
it is an investment of money, but like I'm not convinced that you're doing that to store your money or invest in that. I'm the people I think who are often chasing those are enthusiasts who want these collections, and there is public value. Like, what is a museum if not a public collection? Like, it's owned or managed by the government, maybe. And this is where the issue when Indiana Jones is saying like it belongs in a museum. He's the alternative is that it goes into somebody's private collection, and there are people that have like all these maybe antiquities or whatever, um, in their collection, and they just get to look at them and show their family members and maybe have private showings, and I could see the negative of that because they're taking it away from people. But when a collection is made public in some way or accessible, it feels like that there's a service added. If somebody's gone out and tried to collect all these pieces and then is exhibiting them, and that there's value added, like you guys in your stupid cards there with the nerds jokes from the 80s, like at one point those you could exhibit those or have a bunch of them, and have people come in and see them, and there would be the effort that you put to keep them or preserve them or whatever, there may be value there for
But
future generations.
there can be personal pleasure in just the collecting too. No matter, even if they're rich, you might be rich and be like, man, I can get all this art, and I'm actually really digging art, and I get to have this, and I get to look at it like it's mine.
Yeah, I
So
know, but like, so I guess I was just trying to separate out things like collecting clearly worthless things like, say, bottle caps or rocks that are, what things you find versus because even comics, like when you said, and it's totally true, like, like, if I say big C collectibles, things with cash value, it still is a store of money, and there's the possibility that if you buy an Action Comic #1, it's probably going to be worth more in 10 years than it is when you bought it, in all likelihood. And I remember when I was a kid, it was like in this era of comic books where, like, I think I really think of it as like the Tom, was it Tom McFarlane who wrote Spider-Man, who was doing Spider-Man at the time, and he later described it as the comic books at the time as being junk bombs, and basically how they were releasing. I remember when that rebooted Spider-Man that he was the artist of came out, there was like the gold cover one and the silver cover one. I remember like I get like two silver color covered ones and they were going for like $25 a piece like a couple years later, and I had like three bronze ones, and I was all like, I clearly was as a kid being like, these are going to be worth money someday, because everyone knows that, like, really old comics can be worth a lot because there's very few of them, but then
Yeah,
they were
it's
pumped
a
out.
number one. Ooh.
Yeah, it was exactly being number one.
I
And
have that comic. I have the gold one, I think.
yeah, everyone does. That's why they're worth nothing.
But the funny thing about that too is that, especially with publications, is that you may have an identical second print, but you don't have the first print, and the first print's the one that's worth something,
Yeah,
not the mass
and then, like,
distributed second print.
and it did also occur to me, like, I remember at the time as a kid buying comic books that I clearly thought were not good because it would be like number one, like a new issue would come out and be like, oh, like I remember buying like three copies of this. What was it even called? God, I can't even remember. It was like some guy was kind of had bird wings. It was just really clearly a crappy comic. Didn't go anywhere. But I remember thinking, it's a number one. You never know. This could be the new Superman in 20 years. So I bought the three copies of it. But that's like investing, right? And as a kid, my mind was like, this will be worth money someday. And I approach cards maybe that way too.
Yeah.
I think part of that though is that you've got people who become adults. Like we talked about the appeal of collecting to kids. These kids become adults. The adults want to keep collecting, but suddenly, like collecting rocks off the beach or feathers, like my brother would collect, is not socially acceptable or whatever. You need to turn your collection or your collecting into something that is more adult and defendable and involving complexity and money and all that sort of thing. So baseball cards, hockey cards,
Wine.
comic books, wine, stamps, coins, like all these sort of things.
Well, VHS tapes. I got my Uncle Eve, who loves movies. Hi, Uncle Eve and Peggy. You're great people. Love them. Very nice. They have a gigantic VHS collection. It's like fills a wall, and they're like, "Oh, look at all the movies we have." I'm like, "Throw out those fucking VHS tapes." No, it's trash. So like the thing is, like, you can collect socially acceptable things too, but
Well, no, I know. I'm just saying that, like, I think Mike's taking the point of view that a lot of these people that are investing are considering, because as kids we get caught up in the money thing. We're like, oh, because we're excited about money and we want to like feel like that the investments we're making in our comic books that we're really just buying for the stories is actually also a future investment into some sort of financial portfolio. But adults, I think, just want to feel like it's okay to be able to collect the things that they're collecting, and I'm not necessarily convinced that all of them are like looking for safe havens to store their money. I think they're more like big kids.
Because speaking as someone who buys his fair share of nerd shit, I don't ever buy them with, not that I would define myself as a collector, but I like small collect. Okay, and this is a tangent we can take the conversation into a little bit too, is that there are small collections and there are large collections. For example, if you see behind me, I know on the audio podcast listeners won't see it, but I have a bunch of Talisman board games, many of which I bought myself, some of which you guys bought me as a birthday present. Thank you. I have a near complete collection of Talisman 4th edition stuff, but I'm not saving it to make money. Like, I just think it's cool and I want to own it all because we live in a consumer society, and having all the associated products when you're a fan feels like a fun thing to do. But sometimes it gets carried away, and I'm thinking of like Magic cards. I'm thinking of what's the big toys right now? It's not Skylanders, but like there's a lot of adults who buy like Lego. Like you could make a city with your Lego collection. Like you could just buy 100 houses and fill it with your Lego collection. Like there's no end to what kind of Lego you could own. And so unless you're curating your own collection to have only the meaningful things Lego style, you could end up having a lot. And let me tell you, as someone who sold and junked his Magic card collection, which weighed about as much as I do, so 300 pounds of boxes at least, that it's like having weights around you in terms of your life. Like the more and more junk that you have to say that you own was actually a stressor for me. It was really irritating. I was glad I got rid of them. And I wonder for people who collect that way, I wonder how it makes them feel to have to own all of that stuff, but want to, but not for the future investment of it, just because they're passionate about it. But it's basically a consumer product in a lot of cases.
And speaking of shelves behind us, the one behind me used to be full of tons and tons of games and DVDs and this sort of thing. Now, my wife and I are in the process of trying to declutter a bit, and part of it involves her trying to convince me to say goodbye to things. And there's something I agree with Bo, and I don't know how this ingrains itself, if it's sales, if it's what it is, but like you want to surround yourself sometimes with symbols and images of things you like. And I have on my shelf behind me the VHS Indiana Jones trilogy. I also have it on Blu-ray.
Are you able to watch that VHS copy, by the way?
No, I don't have a VHS player.
So
I
it's
do
just
not
a
have
paperweight. It's a pile of plastic
you're-
you just
you're
keep around your
collecting.
house.
No, it's not just the collecting it. It's that it is larger. It's larger. It's like an Indiana Jones accessory in my house now. When I look at it and I see Harrison Ford smiling with his hat, I'm like, that makes me feel good because I like Indiana Jones. And like by surrounding yourself with stuff that you like, it can make you feel positive. It's just that it can spiral drastically out of control, right? And so you have to purge. And I think that there was a period, now Mike was talking about the streaming media era that we're in, and that it is great, but there was a period of time. It used to be like if you missed a show on TV, that was it. Now then there was a period which really, when you think about human history, will be a blink of an eye, which was when they released the series, like the seasons on DVD, and that was the only way you could watch them, and that was really like cool. I think the pinnacle was like season 1 of Lost when it came out. Everybody seemed to own that on DVD, but now everything's on Netflix, everything's on Hulu, everything's streamed online, or you can buy electronic versions. And so like we have every season of 24 on DVD. Like we got into watching 24 during that period where DVDs were important. But now it's like, Jessie convinced me. She's like, why are we keeping this? Like, we don't need it. It's on Netflix. We can watch it right now on Netflix. Would you even get up to put one of those DVDs in? And part of me, it's like, it's weird. It's like I have a visceral or physical reaction. And you talk about these hoarders and stuff, and I don't consider myself a hoarder by any means, but I can sort of understand where that comes from, and it feels like the toxic side of collections.
I mean, I know how that feels, and I think that like I was raised by, like I mentioned, my parents being borderline hoarders, and I think the deal with hoarders are, or that feeling is that when you like when you have all this stuff, and then you're like, you look at it and be like, but it's not garbage, you know? Like I think that's how you can. I mean, some hoarders do keep garbage too, but you slip down a slope because you look at all this stuff, you have it, and you're like, well, it's not trash. Someone could use it, someone could watch it, and pretty much anything like that. And it's an easy way to inadvertently start collecting. But yeah, I do think that I've realized that so much, basically for me anyways, as an adult, stress has been associated with dealing with all the crap I own, and a lot of that is like stuff that used to be like stuff I might collect, and just to have to sort it, to have to store it, to have to move it, to have to clean it, and then to just see it, it's just like it has no appeal to me anymore. And yeah, so I don't know, I'm getting past it, and I really think it is sort of associated with um, minimalism, for me, to a certain extent. and I'm a long way from a
Well,
minimalist, but
I
I
think
feel
that's
like
the thing is we're being a bit of an echo chamber because I think on some level, except in Crofton who's owned it a little bit, we were purgers. But like I'm trying to feel like if the person listening right now who is someone who has 567 He-Man action figures and all the versions of it and is passionate about it, I'd hate to equivocate him, even though he has what we consider a lot to a hoarder. I think hoarding is a psychological problem. I think someone with a
it's
passion
different.
for having a big collection is not hoarding. Even like I feel like there's a
No,
step that's you can't just equivocate those two.
I agree with that because I do
Yeah.
think again my thing about hoarding was that that's collecting everything like garbage. It's where you're unable to not collect something, and that's clearly a problem. But so when we were talking about this, because a couple things came up that I thought were quite interesting. Because initially when this topic came, I was like, oh, okay, collecting. I'm past it. I used to collect all kinds of crap. I'm past that. It's like and I don't know. I still don't know where I'm going to land on this. But then, so very interesting one. I think Crofton brought up, which was like museums, or public collections, which are important. And I think most people would say those things have value to society or to people. So I was kind of like thinking in my head, I'm like, what? Okay, so how do you break collections down? And then, so I'm like, okay, collections of historical value. Uh, and I think there are some collections that are done for stores of wealth, which might be wine is an example, which is I'd be like arguably for historical that arguably less important. So I do think there's a lot of like the just monetary or people just putting their money someplace, and so I think historical significance, money sink,
Mm-hmm.
merchandising, which is a whole we've all I think said we've as young people I know I've been bought into some of those merchandising collectible type things where you're like I got to get the whole set because
Right.
someone put it out there. And then I think also just general interest stuff where people are like, I like this stuff. It has significance to me. It may not ever be worth any money, but I like it and I enjoy displaying it and maintaining it. So, I mean, do you think I missed any of those? Like, because I was trying to be like, hey, it is a quite
You
lots of
haven't.
categories to that I thought.
There definitely is a lot of categories to it. But I know what you're trying to do because I've seen it on other episodes, which is try and be like, you have a strong opinion, perhaps negative, about one part of collecting, but then there's all these other parts, and you're like, God, this is annoying because it complicates things. I wish I could just
Well, it is.
separate.
I'm trying to understand
I
the whole topic,
I
Croc.
no, I know,
Analyze
I
me.
know, but I'm just saying it would be really nice to be able to separate them, but we can't really. So we look when we look at it as a whole, we have to you have to be like, is most of the stuff that you just so conveniently categorized positive, or is most of that stuff, you know, negative? What's the total balance? And if it's more of a mushy middle, well, we have a verdict for that too. So but I do find it troublesome. Just for the listeners, I shared a link with the fellows here while we were talking, and it's about this guy. I read this article a couple of years back. It's about this guy who essentially is determined to collect every copy of the movie Speed with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock on VHS, just the VHS version, to be clear. And I know he has a story behind it and all this, but it doesn't really matter to me. It just seems ridiculous. Like it seems unfathomable that somebody would be so obsessed with
This
this sort
seems
of
like a
thing.
psychological. Like
And
it's not a
but that's
collection. If you have 500 copies of the same
Well,
identical
that's
product,
exactly right, Bo, and that's where I get like there's the scary and dark and obsessive sides of collecting that is what disturb me the most, because I think there is a tremendous dark side to it, and I think it's really easy to laugh and make fun of like guys like this or others who are just like even that Zadie Smith book I read that I mentioned earlier, again fictitious, but gives you an example. Like the whole concept of it was somebody that this life was essentially being torn apart based on his obsession, and that he found a way to make it into his career, and that's normally a positive with a lot of things. But I do think that, like, going back to what I said about how Bo self assessed himself when deciding what video games to play, and realized that these ones where he would have to check things off a list or complete tasks, like the completionist part of him goes nuts. I think that's with collections, it's the desire to complete things, like to have a complete collection, and and I think everybody has sort of a positive response to that. Like if I had a full collection of something, I'd look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty sweet, I've got all of them, fits perfectly. But I think that can also, you can lose control and all, and it can have negative outcomes. I think, like, I don't know how much you guys got more on collections. I don't want to force verdicts here,
I
but
know where I'm gonna land now. So
okay.
Yeah, I've got a pretty strong sense too. I
Don't talk just because we haven't talked
I have
enough.
one other thing, because we talked a lot about the negative sides, and I saw you brought your Indiana Jones over to show us on the camera here what that looked like, and I just wanted to give that a moment to.
This is a VHS, and this would be the Blu-ray. You see how much thinner it is? Because
but it's not about the size, right? It's about what it means to you.
Yourself with collectibles, and this is the thing. I don't have a VHS player. I can literally not play these right now. And so it makes all the sense in the world to get them out of my house. But at the same time, it's like this nice big box of Harrison Ford smiling at me. So, there's no crystal skull in it. Oh,
you just broke it.
I just broke it. Well, now
you know what you should do, Crofton, is take that box apart and make it into a nice piece of art. Laminate it or something, or set it under glass. Fold it out nicely and ditch the cassettes, because that's all garbage. Like, turn it into something, unique.
Yeah. I'm sure Jesse would love some Indiana Jones
not worth
framed art on the walls of the house.
You're right. You're right, actually, Mike. Like, if there's something that you care about that much and you want to surround it and surround yourself with it, then maybe there's other ways that you can do it. And my impetus for collecting things is, or holding on to things, is different than collecting. It's more to surround myself with these things that I like, to have them conveniently nearby, so I don't feel like I'm losing them forever, even though that's never going to be the case in this society we live in.
And not to be a big, what do you call it, Debbie Downer, as I often am. But, people always say it's with anything, wealth or anything you own, you can't take it with you, right? So it's like, I've thought about that with things that I had collected and carried around for years and moved or whatever to different places, and be like, and what do? You keep accumulating more and more and more until you're what? An old person who becomes, and then you have all this crap, and then maybe your kids, if you have any, are like, Dad, I'm not really into your VHS Sandra Bullock movie collection. You're like, what? But I spent years curating it, and be like, and then be like, I just, I'm not gonna, we're gonna give it away, and then, and then you die. What? Like, you can't take it with you. So it has to be in some ways, a kind of a thing that you have to enjoy it in the present, and this is something I think I've learned as I'm trying to move towards minimalism, is to get away from nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a dangerous component of the bad collecting.
Yeah, well, it's one aspect. I think there's different approach, because look, I have a pile of books here. These are all books I've mostly read. I haven't read them recently. I feel like every book for me is I'm not a big book reader these days, but when I was an avid reader, it was like The Kill. Like, that's my trophy. I read the book. I got through it. Maybe I'll read it again, but this is a part of me now. I want to keep that book with me. Like, it means something. And I totally get what you're saying. It's like, you read it. It's nostalgia. You're still going to retain the memories. Maybe you'll find the book again. Drop it off at the library, donate it, give it to someone else to read. Like, why are you keeping it? But there is a drive. Like, that is my book collection. And everything there, for the most part, means something to me. And I think I'm just restating what Crofton already said with the movies, because it's the same thing. Like,
I will add one thing to this that realized that aggravated me just now, and it's funny because I do it as well to a certain extent. But I know people in particular, there's some people who make conscious efforts to do this, which is essentially display books or display collections of things. It could be, anything to portray a persona, or
Like
and
art collecting.
yeah, well, very very
But I
much
know what
so.
you mean. It's like everyone's got a copy of like No Logo, and you put it on your bookshelf
Yeah,
and you're like, yeah, I read Naomi Klein's No Logo in 1999 or
yeah.
whatever. And I'm smart.
But there's I find like
It's a great
that you see
example.
it with like somebody who reads, for example, all the classics of like, oh, here's some Faulkner and some Fitzgerald, and they're all on the shelf, like these classics, some Hemingway, and meanwhile the what they're reading on the daily, if they are at all, is like more trashy stuff, but they wouldn't display it because they want to be associated
Sure.
with the books
Yeah.
that they're
Well,
Like,
trying.
okay, here's a
collection.
question for Bo. Bo, when was the last time you read a book?
It was the Dungeon Master's Player Guide and
Okay, I don't
Dungeon
consider
Master
that
Guide
a
and
book.
Player
A
Book.
book.
That's a book. It's
No,
paper with
that's
covers
a
on it.
instruction manual for a game. Just tell me a book, a proper book.
Well, can it be nonfiction?
Yeah, you said
The
you could
Dungeon
use
Master's
it.
Guide. It's not.
No, no.
Why
look,
why are you shaming Bo about
I'm not
books?
trying to
Yep,
shame
you
him.
look at
I'm
that.
kinda
See,
trying to make
you're
a
putting
point.
pressure on me so that when you come over, I've got to hide
No,
the
but-
D&D
okay.
books and put the Faulkner and Prue up and my Hemingway.
Well, see, no, but that's my point because I went through phases where I read a lot of that stuff too. I read a lot of those classics, and I liked them. And for a while, I did keep the books. So like when Bo talks about that, I'm like, I can totally identify because I did the same thing, and I'd be like, I want to keep this book. But more recently, I've realized once again that like all these books are in a library that I can go and reference anytime. A lot of these classics you can read online. I don't have to own them. And so for me, the only books that I keep now or that I mean to keep now are ones that either I think someone I know might want to read, that I may wish to reread. And I know there are not, I'm a slow reader, and there are not many books that I'm going to reread if I'm honest with myself, or anything that's a reference. Like I have a bunch of books on writing that are actually useful reference books, and I'll keep those around because you can look through them. But like I plowed my way through some Dickens books, and I was just because I was like I should read some Dickens,
I
and
would
I'm
do
like
that.
I'm never gonna reread Nicholas Nickleby. It's not gonna happen ever. And I'm like I do not need a copy on my goddamn bookshelf.
I've
It's in
read
the library.
I've read all of Henrik Ibsen. Mind you, I liked his stuff, but part of it was to be, I was like, oh, I like Henrik Ibsen. Screw these new theater guys.
Yeah,
the
he's
new
all
part.
right. Yeah.
But yeah, like, okay, this is the most recent thing I've read. Here's my Knights of Sidonia manga collection.
Manga.
Which I got a while ago. But I'm
That's a
proud
collection.
of owning my 13 books of manga.
Showing us pictures.
There's 3 more. Yeah, for the audio listeners, I'm just showing off a giant stack of 14 books because I accidentally bought copy 1 twice.
It's a collector's edition.
Yeah, I didn't do it for that reason. I just bought it twice, but I'd like to give it away to someone who'd read it. But every time I bring it up to you guys, you're like, you're an idiot watching anime.
I mean, and I really do think that there are a few things that it's like if you're going to reread something, because there's still a couple of comic collections that I have and I know I will reread. Like for example, Bone. I have that complete collection.
Yes.
It's really great. I know I'll reread it, and I really look forward to seeing if my kid will read it when he's the right age. And there's a couple of things like that where you think like, okay, maybe again, I'd be like, if someone else could use it, but just to collect it for my own purposes, I've been more and more away from like, I have access because we live in the age of access to stuff, right? Like you can get stuff so many ways, electronic, library, that again, I'm just like, I don't need to keep it. And I feel like and I was making this point before about nostalgia, and I think that's a little bit, I'm bored. This is not a judgment. I did the exact same thing, and I'm not saying anyone should be minimalist. There's no reason in this society to be, unless it does something for you personally. But I do think sometimes that when you collect things like books, it's kind of a nostalgia thing. You look at the book and you say, "Oh, I remember where I was when I was reading that book, or what phase of life I was in." And as much as I'm like, I just feel like nostalgia can be this weird place that you don't want to spend too much time in. It's nice to relive the past sometimes, but be present.
Here's the counter argument too, because I think that in particular our generation, which we have the Netflix and we have there are reprints of classics. There's a wide availability of content. We don't come from a period where where books are being burned, or they're very rare, like books or films or like a lot of the stuff that we do collect. Because I know I was talking with somebody who was from I can't remember, it was Turkey, I believe, but like the notion like that anyone would get rid of a book ever was very different because they're not just available everywhere whenever you want on your e-read or anything like that. And there could be an argument to be made on the part of a collector to say, sure, there's an abundance of it now, but wouldn't it be great to have whatever wonderful thing stamps or whatever it is I'm collecting, like I'm taking care of having these things, and these things will be of value to future generations. And
Well-
and just because the kids say like, what a pile of trash, let's sell it and we get more inheritance, doesn't actually mean that what the person's trying to do by collecting is any less important. You know?
But so I was thinking about this either, and this has helped me got to where I'm going to land on my verdict. But okay, so thinking of like, and these are the ones, and again, it was a really good point by Crofton, was the whole like of historical significance. And think of like great works of art, anything you might see in a history museum, things that are like, as a society, as a collective world, we do not want to forget these things, whatever they are. And are they of importance? And then it made me think like, okay, so say like artwork, for instance, and just say like, okay, a painting like Guernica. I don't know if you know this famous Picasso painting. It's like this painting he did for war. It's quite powerful. It's this huge canvas. It's well documented. You can Google it. You'll see a picture of it. It's all over the place. It's in historical, art history, well documented. If the original goes up in smoke, and no one can look at the original again, but it's preserved in works that have studied it, in anywhere on the internet, other copies. Like, does that original have its own actual value aside from a place to hold wealth, or has it? As long as we remember, we know what it is, we can look at the image of it, that its contribution to art history is still known. Is like the value the same? Like if the original was gone, does it really matter? As long as we remember it, it's documented, we know what it looks like. So does the original of the thing actually need to exist for its impact to still be felt? And I would say probably not. It's like if all reference to it was erased, then that would be a loss to humanity with so many things. But
I would say it depends on what it is.
Probably. But and maybe someone say like when you're standing in front of it, it's just different than looking at a picture in a textbook, and that may be true. But
especially for buildings, like if the pyramids no longer exist, but we had all the records of them. I mean, like
of the pyramid is an interesting example, but like at some point they won't exist. If you have an actual understanding of geological time, if you ever think about that stuff, it's just like. There won't be here at some point. There'll be dust. Everything will be, and
we'll all be dead.
There's ways.
We're all gonna take a dirt nap one day. That's a famous quote from a famous thinker of our time, Michael Hodgins, 2016.
Okay, look, I'm ready for verdicts. I don't know about you.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I think I want to collect more opinions before we go on. See what it there. All right. All right. Harder in the cart, man. So why do you keep holding up that Little Women book? Is that
I'm just showing it off. I'm a feminist.
It's a collector's edition. Is it a work of feminism?
I'm sure it is.
I'm sure it is because you read
women in the title. What would you rather be called Little Men, Mike? God,
there is a book called Little Men, Crofton.
I know you know all about that, wouldn't you, Mike?
Oh, now the homophobic comments.
Anyways, right. I'm only thinking of the Winona Ryder movie, which I've seen several times.
For the record, that comment was about penis size. Anyway, who's gonna go first?
I will.
All right.
Okay.
Wait a second. I'm the one who's gonna.
Yeah, you go second. You go second.
So
I'll close. All right.
I don't think it really matters.
It does. It matters.
Okay. Collections are bullshit.
Whoa.
Ooh. And I think my last kind of point about the actual existence of a specific thing and knowledge of it, I think in some ways knowledge of the thing is enough. And then So the museum point, the public collections thing is a really excellent one about collections. But when you think about who curates those things, would you call them collectors? I know there's private collectors that are into that kind of stuff, but I generally tend to think of those things as like historians. A historian is a, I know Crofton wants to say, Mike, this is exactly what I was saying, but it's a true. If you're a historian, like if you're a historian and someone says, "What do you do for a living?" You'd be like, "I collect shit." You wouldn't say that. You'd be like, "No, I study the past and I look for artifacts." And that's what people do. But it's that's different than collecting a bunch of shit now and being like, I need in my house to display all this stuff in my house. I just think that those things are different. And people that study the past are immensely important, and what they do is document it in many ways so that if originals or if the collections are destroyed, the memory of them and the impact of them is not. And I think that's why a historian is different than a collector who's just like, I got all this stuff, it's worth a bunch of money. And I think that that's kind of BS to people that are just like, oh, it's going to be worth money someday. If that's why you're buying something, I'm like, and I landed on bullshit. I don't know that I'd ever say it's bad, but I would just say anyone who just likes collecting stuff because they like it. I mean, I would say maybe check your materialism a little bit. I don't where I stand on that. Check past episodes, but if you like it, whatever. More power to you, I guess. But yeah, it's a bullshit thing.
Okay. All right, Crofton. Let's hear
I'll go
what
next.
your
I was
collected
just, and
thoughts are.
I'm not gonna, because I want to argue points of Mike's thing. The only thing I'll say is that museum things are called museum collections, and it's because they're
And they're
collected,
put together by the collectors,
and they're put together
by a curator. That's different.
but who curates the collection, and it's just verbiage to make the collecting sound more adult and fancy. You're
Well,
drinking the
okay,
Kool-Aid.
okay.
Okay,
Since you wanted to argue about my thing, let me just come in because I was at a museum today,
yeah.
and there was a whole bunch of dinosaurs on display. But guess what? They weren't the actual fossils. They were like plastic forms of them that looked identical. So who the hell cares? Because it was you went in there. It's impressive. You get to learn about dinosaurs. You're not looking at the actual bones someone dug out of the ground. I learned things I didn't know. My kid was like, "Whoa, look, dinosaurs." It wasn't the original, so
I know, but
point shattered, Crofton.
no, it's not at all. That's they don't call them the dinosaur bones collection. You would go like a collection would be like a suits of armor, for instance, like that. Anyway,
And if they're all historically accurate replicas, does it make any difference?
no, if they're originals, I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I'm just saying if they were accurate replicas, you wouldn't know the difference.
See,
You'd still be able to understand what they meant.
my point here I sort of had you pegged earlier as wanting you recognize something was valid and you're like, I need to find a way to separate this from what
Stop
I actually
judging me and give me a
what I
verdict.
actually want, and then you did exactly what I thought you were going to do. So I just felt I needed to when you're like, it's not really, they're not called collectors. No, it's a collection. It's the same thing. That said, I am
Yeah, now that I've shat on you, let me move on to my point. Go ahead, Crofton.
I think collecting and collections are bullshit. Mike and I are actually not too far apart. And while I'm not as anti-materialist or I have hoarding tendencies and all that sort of stuff. I apologize to the audio only listeners because I've been showing off a lot of my bad habits here on the video feed. But I agree with a lot of what he says, and I think that collecting comes from a natural place in the sense that I feel that all humans want to. I feel that it's encouraged and has been encouraged throughout my life anyway to various degrees. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why it's been encouraged. I think it's just people feel it, and it's a common element of bonding, but it's something that can have a dark side. People can obsess over it easily. Mike did a really good job earlier of breaking down the different types of collectibles, and I think that it just makes you realize how mushy it is, and how you have people that are like obsessing over things or devoting their lives to things in an unhealthy manner. and then you have other people that are building collections for museums and that sort of thing, in a much more positive manner. So it's very difficult to just go out and say that it is flat out good or flat out bad. And the final thing I will say is that in terms of like having my own personal collection, I like surrounding myself with things because they make me feel good for whatever reason. Like they remind me of those things, but it isn't out of a collecting, like a gotta catch 'em all Pokemon mentality, which I think is a common thing, and I think everybody has to a certain degree. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. It's bullshit.
There it is. Okay, now I'm up. Ooh boy, collecting. All right. I think you guys. I feel like this show took on a kind of a negative tone, a little bit. I mean, I think it was fair and balanced, but there was, it seemed to me that we're all individuals who are aware that there's a price to be paid for having stuff, whether it's through conversation with your partner, such as Crofton's having about decluttering, or having a hermit-like stoic philosophy of you don't own stuff owns you, that Mike has on display. And I find myself agreeing with both of you, but also really kind of digging the passion of people who do really love a thing, whether it's a commercial product or art or toenail clippings or whatever it may be. I think it's cool that people are into things, and I feel like, we should be encouraging people not to be like, to not have cool stuff because we can make cool stuff, and to just kind of either be so salty and bitter that we don't bother with these things and they're not worth it. Like, I feel like the things we make can be worth it. And I feel like part of the way that passion for certain things expresses itself is in collecting things. But I am with you guys in the sense that, like, I got rid of Magic cards, and whenever I feel like, it's kind of like shaving my beard. When you start to get a lot of it, you want the beard to go down a bit. I like having some hair on my face, but I don't want a ton of hair. And that's just my own personal balance that I try to keep with the stuff, the physical things that I have. But I think that's down to a matter of preference. If you buy yourself a house and turn it into a museum to He-Man figurines, then you're beautiful. So I'm going to say that collecting is good.
Don't think everything's good.
That's not true.
I mean, I do appreciate your positive. You do bring a lot of positive spin to stuff, and I do appreciate that, Bo.
Yeah, it's more a like not completely for me. Like, if you look behind me, there's a ton of. We don't play Dungeons and Dragons that much anymore, but there's like a full shelf of books. It's my D&D collection. It pains me to think of not having that. I like that I have that stuff.
But not one of the three of us, and I think this was reflected in Bo's comments, not one of the three of us are active collectors, the kind that are going out there trying to fill a collection or seeking.
But I mean, and I know it's kid stuff, but I really feel like I was. I feel like a good portion of my, like, what's that age of youth from, like, I don't know, 9 to 13? That age, I was like, I wanted to, tweens. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Anyways, where I was like, I wanted to collect the things, and I would go to like flea markets and look for old comic books and whatever. But yeah.
It's funny, childhood is seemingly divided in collections. I'm just remembering some now. Like, I had a Hardy Boys collection of books. I had but yeah, like I was over at my mom's place a couple of weeks ago, and she's not getting any younger, and at one point, who knows, may even downsize. I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff in that house, and there's like they inherited, I think, a China collection, like buying China, and I can't remember ever using it, and it's in this giant antique China cabinet. And my mom sort of made a joke about it, essentially. And I remember we were never supposed to open it and be like, "Oh, that's the antique fine china." And it may very well be antique, but it's a good example of like collecting for no purpose except to take up room, and to have on display in this. So anyway, if you have opinions on collecting, maybe you are an avid stamp collector and want to tell us all about it, please don't. You can reach us at goodbad at Gmail, on Gmail at goodbadbull at gmail.com. God, I butchered that one. You can follow us on Twitter at goodbadbull. We would love it if you would subscribe to our show on iTunes or on the Google Play store. Good, bad, or bullshit. You can give us reviews on all of those storefronts. 5 stars preferably. Your comments are welcome. Tell all your friends. We want to grow. We want people to engage with us and talk to us. We want to collect them and then display them on some sort of virtual shelf. And if you go to goodbadbull.com, you can view sort of all our archived episodes. All our stuff's on there. Bo does a great little write-up with awesome pictures. I can't wait to see what he's going to choose this week for this episode. We're also all individuals of an individual nature, and you can follow us online individually. Let's start with Old Spice. Mike, where can people follow you? I know from good authority you just wrote a tweet.
I did make a tweet at ML Hodgins.
and Axe body spray.
You can find Axe,
Smell
the
it from
nicest
here.
smelling of the bunch, on Twitter at Bo Schwartz.
And you can follow me at Crofton Steers on Twitter. It's funny. This is a part of the show where I would normally ask you guys something about like, so what's the weirdest thing you collected or whatever. But I feel like we've gone over our collections in pretty great detail.
When you talked about your mom, it made me think. So my aunt, who has no children, and I'm like her godson, and my brother and I are closer, collects a lot of things. And the thing that when you said the fine china, I thought of my aunt's massive case. Well, she has a couple of them, but do you know what Hummels are? Hummels?
No.
Well, Google it. They're like these little, I guess they're made of glass or porcelain or something. They look like children in kind of these like doing things. Like you'll see a little boy with a shovel and there's a snowman beside him and it's made out of like glass and it's painted nice. She has like hundreds of these things, and they have this particular little like cute little like toddlers doing stuff. A lot of them are like that, and I'm thinking like when she downsizes, there's like
I just saw what they look like.
You saw what Hummels look like? My aunt has hundreds of Hummels. Like, what are we gonna do with those Hummels? And those actually, I mean, I don't know that they're worth anything, but I know that she paid enough to get them all, and yeah.
They look like they're worth a lot. Like the sponsored link on Google, when I searched, has the cheapest one here at $100 and then up it to 310.
Yeah, they're collectible. So, I mean, I don't know what her collection is worth, but she likes it. And I'm like, I don't want to curate that thing when it's gone. But yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. That is crazy. There's so many weird collectibles and like things that are dedicated for collecting. Like there's especially those little figurines. There's army, army men train sets. Like train sets have been a big sort of.
And also just think about like, I mean, this is it seems like it's more women, but it's men too. Like types of clothing, like shoe collections. Some people.
That's true.
You talked about this colleague of yours who's got a shoe collection.
Yeah, she totally does.
And I'm like, that boggles my mind. Like if one thing that I realized recently about Facebook was that when it says like this memory of you 8 years ago, and then I'll look at it and be like, I just wore that T-shirt yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, I do not shop for clothes often. So yeah, I'm not guilty of having a clothes collection.
I was actually thinking about that today, where I was the exact sort of similar thought about how like when we do this podcast, sometimes I think about what shirt I'm wearing, because I'm like, man, I probably I've worn the same shirt a zillion times. Especially I do ! With Bo, which you can follow at EXM Podcast. But I'm doing the video on that, and I'm often wearing like dark T-shirts or whatever, and I'm sure people know my whole wardrobe. Meanwhile, I'm thinking of celebrities like Kanye West, and if they ever wear the same shirt twice or the same pair of shoes, like what their wardrobes must look like, and how it's ridiculous.
They wear their shirt and they put it in a second area where it gets used as toilet paper. Then they.
Oh, I thought you were going to they sell it on eBay. They just take it off.
Then they sell it on eBay. That's the third pile.
But Or you do like the, Steve Jobs, in like a black turtleneck, and that's it.
Yeah, but
Yes.
he never wears the same black turtleneck, or he didn't. He's now
Whatever, you
passed.
wouldn't know the difference if it was the same one.
I think Mike's not far from that.
You think he wore the same one everywhere and he was humble guy?
No, he was not humble, I don't think.
No.
I think Mike at one point is going to be like, I just need a uniform for life. And we'll just be like, I need to paint my entire walls white and move all my stuff to the curb.
I always like Jerry Seinfeld's like on his show in the future when we're all wearing the one piece silver things with the V. I'm like, yep, everyone wears the same thing. I'm like, whatever. You don't have to think.
I
about
like
it.
the idea that Mike hears that and he doesn't find it funny. He's like, yeah, this is minimalist
This is
living.
not a bad idea.
Good idea.
I can see where
I
this
just
is
like
going.
this one piece like silver. The future.
Yeah, anyway, I'm collecting is a huge pain in the ass.
All
But
right.
I got my collections and stuff.
All right,
Yeah,
we can find a place to end there. I want to thank the people who watched the VOD for tuning in, and we'll be back next week. Crofton, say bye. Or
I would tell you to tell your friends that if there's one episode for them to watch the VOD, this is it. So get them to watch the video
so
version.
you can see Indiana Jones.
So you can see a VHS copy of Indiana Jones.
and
Even
you
VHS.
get to see real manga
No
books.
one's ever seen that before.
Look, the book opens the wrong way. Whoa.
Make me an offer. Make me an offer. I'll listen.
Oh man, I should show off my Spider-Man. All right, later. Penis.
And what-